In 1903, a small book gathered 7 of the most powerful black minds in America between 2 covers. It was called, with deliberate bluntness, The Negro Problem. Booker T. Washington opened it. W.E.B. Du Bois answered him. Charles Chesnutt, Wilford Smith, H.T. Keeling, Paul Laurence Dunbar, and T. Thomas Fortune each took up a same enormous question. 40 years out of slavery, with the vote being stripped away state by state, these writers asked what freedom was actually worth and how a people could rise. This is a deep dive into that book, essay by essay, in the author's own arguments, their own evidence, and their own words. The Negro Problem is not one argument, but a symposium, 7 essays that agree on the destination and quarrel fiercely about the road. Should the freedmen build wealth first through the trades, as Washington urged, or must higher education and the vote come first, as Du Bois insisted? Chesnutt and Smith document how the law itself was turned into a weapon. Keeling weighs the inborn gifts and the inbred wounds of slavery. Dunbar paints a gallery of living heroes, and Fortune asks plainly what place the race actually holds in American life. Together, they form a single searching portrait of a people standing at the hinge between bondage and citizenship, refusing to be told that the door of opportunity was closed. The book appears in 1903, when a generation had grown to adulthood in freedom, and the country had begun, quietly and deliberately, to take that freedom back. The essays speak to a precise moment. New Southern state constitutions were disenfranchising black voters wholesale. The Supreme Court was looking away, and lynching had become a near daily horror. Into that climate steps Booker T. Washington, the famous principal of Tuskegee Institute, who edits the volume and writes its first chapter. Around him gather a novelist, a lawyer, an educator, a poet, and a journalist, men of national stature. Each was asked to address the same question from his own vantage. The result is less a manifesto than a conversation, and at its center sits a disagreement that would define black thought for half a century. 2 of the 7 essays answer each other directly. Booker T. Washington argues that a people just out of slavery must first lay an economic foundation, learn trades, own land, build wealth, and that pressing too hard for political rights only invites backlash. W.E.B. Du Bois answers that this puts the cart before the horse, that a race is saved by its exceptional men, that the very best must receive a full college education to lead, and that to surrender the ballot is to surrender everything. Both men want the same thing, full and dignified citizenship, but they disagree on what must come first. That tension between patient self-help and insistent agitation runs through the entire book and through black political life long after these pages were written. Washington begins with a distinction. He says the race had to learn the hard way, the difference between being worked and working. Being worked, he writes, meant degradation. Working means civilization. All honest labor is honorable, and all idleness disgraceful. He insists that every race which has gotten upon its feet has done so largely by laying an economic foundation, generally by beginning with the proper cultivation and ownership of the soil. Coming out of slavery, he says, too many began at the wrong end, chasing abstract learning while neglecting the practical skills that build wealth and independence. His argument is not against the mind, but about order and sequence. First, secure the material ground beneath your feet, and from that ground, everything higher can grow. Washington makes a striking and uncomfortable claim that for 250 years, the plantation had been, in a crude and selfish way, an industrial school. Enslaved people built the houses, made the clothes and shoes, and worked as carpenters, blacksmiths, wheelwrights, brick masons, and engineers, so that at the close of the war, the Negro held nearly all the skilled and common labor of the South. He does not apologize for slavery, which he calls a curse to both races. He simply states the fact. Then, he argues, came a tragic mistake. For nearly 20 years after the war, that skill was overlooked. Men were taught Latin and the sciences, while the trained craftsmen of slavery died out, with few coming up to take their places. The hand had been untrained, while the head was filled. Washington presses his case with vivid examples. He quotes the railroad magnate C.P. Huntington, who said schools teach everybody a little of almost everything, but rarely the very thing a child needs to make his way in life. He describes the laundress's daughter, sent to high school and returned home educated out of sympathy with the only work available to her, and therefore fit for nothing. The remedy, he says, is not less education, but education harnessed to real life, skill and intelligence poured into actual labor until drudgery is lifted into dignity. He invokes Frederick Douglass, every blow of the sledgehammer wielded by a sable arm, every house built by a black man, is a blow against prejudice. Without industrial development, Washington insists, there can be no wealth, and without wealth, no leisure for the higher arts. To show his philosophy in action, Washington describes Tuskegee itself. The school began teaching agriculture, he says, with no appliances except one hoe and a blind mule. From that beginning, it grew to own 2,000 acres, 800 of them cultivated each year by the young men. More than 1,400 students received instruction in 33 trades and industries: carpentry, blacksmithing, printing, brickmaking, engineering, dairying, nursing, and more, alongside their academic and religious training. Of the 60 buildings on the grounds, all but 4 were erected almost wholly by the students, and even the bricks in the walls were made in the school's own brickyard, 2 million of them in a single year. Tuskegee was, in his telling, a place where students earned their education by building it with their own hands. Washington answers his critics head-on. Many think industrial education means making the Negro work as he worked in slavery. That, he says, is the opposite of his meaning. Real industrial training teaches a man not merely to labor, but to make the forces of nature, steam, water, electricity, work for him, lifting labor out of toil and drudgery into the plane of the dignified and the beautiful. He denies any wish to limit the race's mind. By the side of industrial training, he writes, should always go mental and moral training. But he believes the surest path to art, letters, and statesmanship runs through the little things that lie about one's door. I plead for industrial education, he concludes, not because I want to cramp him, but because I want to free him, to see him enter the all-powerful commercial world. Du Bois opens with the line that named a movement: the Negro race, like all races, is going to be saved by its exceptional men. The problem of education, he argues, must first deal with the talented tenth, the task of developing the best of the race so they may guide the mass away from contamination and death. He warns against making money the object of man training, for then you develop moneymakers, but not men, and against making technical skill the object, for then you get artisans, but not in their fullness, men. Manhood itself must be the aim: intelligence, broad sympathy, and knowledge of the world. On that foundation, he says, you may safely build breadwinning and skill of hand, never fearing that the man will mistake the means of living for the object of life. Du Bois grounds his thesis in history, parading the exceptional men of the past. In colonial days came Phyllis Wheatley and Paul Cuffey. Benjamin Banneker, the almanac maker, wrote to Thomas Jefferson, quoting his own words back to him, that all men are created equal. There was David Walker, the wild voice whose 1829 appeal first roused Southern legislators to the terror of abolition. Then came the Great Crusade itself. Purvis and Ramond, Sojourner Truth, Alexander Crummell, and above all, Frederick Douglass. Black leaders who, he says, worked shoulder to shoulder with white reformers in a movement whose success would have been impossible without them. They stood as living proof of the race's possibilities. These men, Du Bois argues, were the talented 10th of their generations, and they made American slavery finally impossible. Du Bois states his governing principle bluntly: was there ever a nation civilized from the bottom upward? Never. It is ever from the top downward that culture filters. The talented 10th rises and pulls all that are worth saving up to its vantage ground. He traces the machinery of that rise after the war. Out of Northern colleges came teachers who founded black colleges. From those colleges came normal schools, and from the normal schools came teachers for the public schools. By his arithmetic, the colleges trained some 2,000 men in Greek, Latin, and mathematics. Those 2,000 trained 50,000 more in morals and manners, and those in turn taught the alphabet and thrift to 9 million people who now held $300 million of property. He calls it the most wonderful peace battle of the 19th century. Anticipating the charge that higher education produces useless men, Du Bois answers with data from the Atlanta Conference. Of the college-bred Negroes surveyed, over half were teachers, a sixth were clergymen, and the rest were physicians, lawyers, civil servants, businessmen, and farmers. 557 of them owned more than $1.33 million in real estate by 1899. These men, he says, are not paupers or spendthrifts. They are exactly what they ought to be, the group leaders who set the ideals of their communities and head their social movements. The Negro people, lacking long-established traditions and institutions, need social leadership more than most groups, and it is the college-bred preacher and teacher who supply it, first as teachers, then as teachers of teachers, placing an attainable ideal before every black child.
Here, Du Bois sharpens his point into a warning. To attempt to establish any system of common and industrial school training without first providing for the higher training of the very best teachers is, he says, simply throwing your money to the winds. Schoolhouses do not teach themselves. Piles of brick and mortar and machinery do not send out men. It was Fisk, Atlanta, and Howard, colleges born of the abolitionists' sacrifice, that placed 30,000 teachers in the black schools of the South. Then he turns the knife. Even Tuskegee, he notes, is staffed by college-bred men and women, Harvard and Oberlin graduates, scholars who read Virgil and Homer. The very industrial schools that decry higher education depend entirely upon it for their own teachers. To attack the colleges, he argues, is to saw off the branch on which every other school is sitting. Du Bois closes by reframing the entire quarrel. He is, he says, an earnest advocate of manual training for black boys and white boys alike. He calls it the most valuable addition to Negro education since the war, next to the founding of the colleges. But the object of all true education, he insists, is not to make men carpenters. It is to make carpenters men. That requires both technical skill and liberally trained leaders to teach a community what life means. Then comes his charge to white America. Here is a race transplanted by the criminal foolishness of your fathers. The millions are here, and here they will remain. If you do not lift them up, they will pull you down. Education must not simply teach work, it must teach life. The talented 10th must be made leaders of thought and missionaries of culture. The novelist Charles Chesnutt opens with cold legal clarity. The right of American citizens of African descent to vote on the same terms as others, he writes,
is plainly declared and firmly fixed by the Constitution, that question is foreclosed. For 35 years, while the law was measurably respected, the colored people made rapid strides in education, wealth, character, and self-respect. They reduced their illiteracy by nearly half and accumulated $300 million in property. Some attained national distinction in art and letters. Then Chesnutt offers a piercing diagnosis. It is precisely this progress, not any stagnation, that explains the virulent Southern hostility to their rights. The South, he suggests, fears the rising, educated Negro far more than the ignorant ex-slave, and means to head him off before he grows strong. Chesnutt lays out with a lawyer's precision how the theft was engineered. The disenfranchising constitutions of 6 states avoided naming race, that would be unconstitutional, and instead built a machine in 3 layers. First came property and poll tax requirements and reading tests. But the Negro had progressed too far for those alone, so a second layer added the notorious understanding clause. The applicant must read or explain when read to him any section of the Constitution, left entirely to the discretion of the registering officer. Because even this might catch poor white men, a third layer rescued them, the grandfather clause, by which any descendant of a man entitled to vote in 1867, before black men could vote at all, inherited the franchise automatically. The whole contraption, Chesnutt shows, was devised to violate the spirit of the Constitution while seeming to honor its letter. Then Chesnutt produces the proof. Under Alabama's new Constitution, out of 181,000 black men of voting age, fewer than 3,000 were registered. In Montgomery County, the seat of the state capital, only 47 of 7,000 were allowed. In several counties, not one. And the courts, he charges, simply looked away. In the case of Giles versus Harris, brought by a colored citizen of Montgomery, the Supreme Court confessed itself powerless to remedy what it admitted might be a great political wrong, while carefully avoiding any ruling that it was a wrong. This decision, Chesnutt warns, is scarcely less than a reaffirmation of the Dred Scott ruling. It amounts to declaring that, despite the 15th Amendment, colored men have no political rights the states are bound to respect. The right was being chased round and round a closed circle. Chesnutt insists the ballot is no paper right to be lightly surrendered. The disfranchised Negro is taxed without representation, the very grievance, he reminds us, that the founders made the basis of a bloody revolution. Worse, the white South counts the disfranchised millions to swell its delegation in Congress to nearly twice its just size, then uses that power to oppose every measure protecting colored citizens. He rejects the argument that an unused right is worthless. White men never reason that way about their own rights because they know the value of ideals. The rich and educated can command many votes and find other means of protection, he writes, but the poor man has only one weapon, and he should guard it as a sacred treasure. The Negro who would yield this right, he says flatly, deserves to be a slave. He has the servile spirit.
Chesnutt confronts Booker Washington by name, though respectfully. Washington had praised the new constitutions for putting a premium on intelligence, property, and character. So does every penitentiary sentence put a premium on good conduct, Chesnutt retorts. But it is poor consolation to the unjustly condemned to be told he may shorten his sentence by good behavior. Washington's counsel to go slow on civil and political rights means, in practice, silent submission to injustice, and it is not a pleasing spectacle to see the robbed applaud the robber. The remedy, Chesnutt argues, lies through political action. The courts should be bombarded with suits until they rule plainly, and Congress, which alone can right a political wrong, must be pushed to enforce the 14th and 15th Amendments. Eternal vigilance, he reminds his readers, is the price of liberty.
The lawyer Wilford H. Smith argues the constitutional case. The colored people, he writes, owe their freedom and citizenship to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and it is to these they must look for protection. He reminds the nation that more than 300,000 black soldiers answered Lincoln's call and helped win the war at Appomattox. The amendments were in part the country rising to do justice to them. Congress reinforced them with the Civil Rights Act of 1875, guaranteeing equal enjoyment of inns, public conveyances, theaters, and amusements, regardless of race. But in the civil rights cases, the Supreme Court struck that law down as applied to the states. Equality of citizenship, Smith writes, suffered a severe blow. The colored people rightly viewed the decision as unsound and prompted by race prejudice, a narrow reading where a liberal one was owed. Smith catalogs how black citizens were stripped of standing before the law. By 1875, the South had driven them from the legislatures. Now, he reports, not one Negro sits as a lawmaker in any Southern state. Jury commissioners excluded them from grand and petty juries, so they faced courts that judged their lives and property while denying them any voice. One vote on a grand jury might prevent an unjust indictment. One on a petty jury might save an innocent life. Then came the Jim Crow car laws, running, he writes, from the Gulf of Mexico into the national capital, fair on their face, but designed to humiliate. In Georgia, a Negro could not buy a sleeping car berth at all. And peonage laws bound farm laborers to plantations by perpetual debt, a system, he says, that made them virtual slaves to the landlord. Smith argues that injustice lives less in the words of laws than in their administration, and he proves it with cases. A black boy who fought only to keep a larger white boy from cutting him was fined $25 until his washerwoman mother's tearful quee moved the judge to split the fine between both boys. He praises Mississippi's Chief Justice Campbell, who reversed the murder conviction of George Morey and a rape conviction in the Monroe case, vowing to guard jealously the rights of the poor and friendless. But then comes the tragedy of Sewall Smith, a prosperous, respected mulatto barber whose only offense was letting a poor white boy carry his satchel. A mob of idle whites assaulted him. When he defended himself, 100 men poured off a train and riddled him with bullets. No one was even arrested. Such, Smith shows, is justice without a vote.
The educator H.T. Keeling offers a frank inventory of the race's virtues and failings, drawing one key distinction. Inborn traits belong to the blood and are ineradicable, while inbred traits are the result of experience and can be reversed. Among the inborn excellencies, he says, the Negro is intensely religious, a faith the master could never suppress even while forbidding all other gatherings. He is imaginative, gifted in eloquence, music, and invention, the poetic quality showing in the slave preacher's sermon and the verse of Phyllis Wheatley and Dunbar alike. And he is affectionate and without vindictiveness. He does not nurse even great wrongs, Keeling writes, recalling the enslaved who guarded the master's family and the bishop who returned to relieve his former owner's distress. These gifts, he insists, are the warp and woof of the soul.
Keeling continues his catalog of inborn strengths. The Negro has great endurance, both of disposition and of body, a patience so marked the world doubted his courage, until the soldiers of the 1860s and 1890s wrote forbearance, not cowardice, as its true name. His page in the nation's war record, Keeling says, is without blot or blemish, admirable for courage in the field, commendable for obedience in camp. And he is cheerful, whistling as he hoes. The mournful minor key of the Jubilee songs, Keeling argues, expresses an experience, not a nature. The slave sang of griefs he was forbidden to speak. He adds a scholarly caution. African peoples differ among themselves as widely as Italians from Germans, and those tribal differences echo in their American descendants. But broadly, these warm and resilient traits lie at the base of the race everywhere. Then Keeling turns, just as candidly, to the inbred defects, which he is careful to call the entailment of slavery, not the failings of blood. Shiftlessness, he says, came from a system in which the slave had no need to plan, for direction always came from without. Improvidence and extravagance followed. The freedman more often deals with the pawnbroker than the banker, buys finery on the installment plan, yet hesitates to buy a house. There is dishonesty, learned as reprisal, business unreliability, born of never handling credit, and a corrosive suspicion of his own race, slavery's bred-in detective force, by which each slave was taught to distrust his fellow. And there is ignorance, much of it shallow literacy. Yet Keeling notes, to have thrown off half of that ignorance in 40 years is a wonderful showing. These are wounds, and wounds can heal. Having weighed both sides of the ledger, Keeling prescribes the cure. The freedman must be educated to work with skill, with self-direction, in combination, and unremittingly. Industrial education with constant application, he calls it, the slogan of his rise from racial pauperism to productive manliness. Let the exceptional minds have their exceptional opportunities, he allows, but let the 99 who must work somehow, somewhere, have a chance to train near home. Above all, train him in morals, to speak the truth, keep a promise, touch only his own property, buy houses and make homes, and save rather than display. Let us subordinate mere knowledge, he writes, to the work of invigorating the will and clarifying the moral vision. Do this, Keeling concludes, and America will have enriched her blood and shown the world how to deal with its darker races without reproach. The poet Paul Laurence Dunbar paints what he calls a noble canvas crowded with heroic figures, a gallery of representative Black Americans. But first, he draws a fine distinction. There is a difference between attainment and achievement. The street corner politician who secures a courthouse janitorship may be written up as representative, but the truly representative man is one who has achieved something for the betterment of his race, rather than the aggrandizement of himself. His first hero is Robert Smalls, the enslaved pilot who, in 1862, steered the Confederate steamer Planter out of Charleston Harbor, past Fort Sumter, past Morris Island, and delivered her to the Union fleet. 40 years had not settled whether he was hero or felon, patriot or traitor, Dunbar writes. But with his face turned toward the dawn, Smalls had done something that made him representative of the best in sturdy Negro manhood. Dunbar links his heroes by character. It may seem a far cry, he writes, from Robert Smalls to Booker T. Washington, principal at Tuskegee, yet both are pilots who steered through equally stormy waters, guided by a single purpose and unmoved by criticism. He calls Washington the foremost figure in Negro national life and the race's most adroit diplomatist. Of Du Bois, he says, "We have had no such ripe and finished scholar since the death of Crummell. Harvard gave him to us, a man who goes at truth as a hard-riding squire takes offense." He praises Kelly Miller of Howard, the Johns Hopkins mathematician who settled the question of whether a Black man could master exact science. And he tells, with a shade of bitterness, of Richard T. Greener, Harvard's first Black graduate, exiled to a consulship at Vladivostok, only to be vindicated when the Boxer Uprising made his far post suddenly vital. Dunbar widens his canvas to fill it with achievement in every field. There are inventors like Granville T. Woods, J.H. Groves, the Potato King of Kansas, Daniel Hale Williams of Chicago, one of the country's truly great surgeons. There is Congressman George H. White, whose farewell speech to the 56th Congress,
defeated by disenfranchisement, stirred the nation and fired the hearts of his brothers. The women must not be forgotten, he says, for to them the men look for inspiration. Mary Church Terrell, speaking for Negro womanhood from the platform. And he ends with the Tanners, Bishop Benjamin Tanner, theologian and poet, and his son Henry Ossawa Tanner, a poet with the brush, whose paintings hang in the Luxembourg Gallery in Paris. It is a little dark still, Dunbar closes, but somewhere out of the darkness, a bird is singing to the dawn.
The journalist T. Thomas Fortune opens with a hard self-examination. No race can grow healthy, he argues, without a self-reliant spirit and an intense pride of race, ideally reinforced by pride of ancestry, qualities he most admires in the rising Japanese. But the Afro-American, he says, has little pride of ancestry. Few can trace their parentage back 4 generations, and the mixing of blood under slavery has weakened the very foundation on which pride of race must be built. This, more than poverty or oppression, he believes, explains why his people fail to stand together as Irishmen and Jews do the world over. They could not sustain the National Afro-American League or its successor council. Restrained by selfish, petty motives, they hung separately instead of together while their rights were stripped away, as Nero, he says, fiddled while Rome burned. Fortune turns to history and names a betrayal. The Afro-American people, he writes, enjoyed their full civil and political rights from the adoption of the War Amendments until 1876 and 1877, when they were sacrificed by their own Republican allies of the North to secure the presidency for Rutherford B. Hayes. The excesses of Reconstruction, for which the Negro is endlessly blamed, he lays squarely at the feet of the Northern carpetbaggers who planned and pocketed the plunder. The Negro, he says, got only the credit and the odium. It will take the race fully a century, Fortune predicts, to recover what it lost, and that recovery, he believes, will come not to the race as a mass, which he doubts can be unified, but to the individual, as the reward of character and thrift through assiduous courtship of the schoolmaster and the bank. Fortune ends with a clear-eyed balance of loss and hope. As a mass, he judges, the freedmen's industrial position may be worse than at the close of Reconstruction. He quotes Du Bois on the black farmers held as peons, bound to an economic slavery from which the only escape is death or the penitentiary. Yet the individual black contractor and landowner has a fighting chance, and Fortune predicts the Negro is destined to become the master agriculturist of the South. Above all, he points to what is new: a comfortable home life, powerful churches owning millions in property, and a quenchless thirst for knowledge that has cut illiteracy by 40%. These results, he says, confound the prophets of evil. Social growth is the slowest of all growth, but the signs of a healthy maturity are there for any who will read them.
7 voices, 1 question. Washington asked the race to build its foundation in the soil and the trades. Du Bois demanded that its talented 10th be trained to lead and that the vote never be surrendered. Chesnutt and Smith exposed how law and ballot were stolen in broad daylight. Keeling weighed the gifts and the scars of bondage. Dunbar lifted up the living proof of greatness, and Fortune insisted that the individual, by character and thrift, would slowly win back what the mass had lost. More than a century later, the argument at the heart of this little book, patience or protest, the hand or the mind, the foundation or the franchise, has never quite been settled. If this journey through the Negro Problem moved you, take a moment to share, subscribe, and like, so these voices keep speaking. Thank you for listening with us on Africa Good Life.